Hey, Dr. Wonder. I am the author of, sorry about that, It's Not You, It's Your Thyroid. So today, welcome to the webinar. If you're here, sorry, for the thyroid webinar. Yeah, we're going to talk about thyroid, but that's not really what it's about, okay? I want to kind of set the background. I practice functional medicine. We basically handle three conditions: thyroid, and then really the condition we're going to talk about a little later, reversing type 2 diabetes, and then also reversal of early Alzheimer's and dementia. But first I want to go in. I've been doing this for 22 years, spoke all over the world, things like that. Let's get into the bulk. Typically you're a woman, you don't have to be, but typically you are, and you start having some symptoms. Maybe you can't lose weight despite a good diet and exercise and proper nutrition, at least what you know. Hair thinning, falling out, can't fall asleep, can't stay asleep, and even if you do sleep, when you wake up, you're still tired. That's something called wired and tired. Life-changing fatigue, okay? Constipation, could be diarrhea also, constipation. Suffered also maybe from infertility. Moody, temperature change, like hot bothers you or cold bothers you. Brain fog, like bad. We had a patient, they had so bad brain fog that they got a program that I didn't know about, it's called a Boomerang from Google, where she could line up her emails at 9 in the morning when she said she was fresh, and then program them to send them to her boss at 3, 3:15, 3:30, etc. So those are the main symptoms. So you start having those symptoms and you're like, hey, man, I need to get this checked out. So you go to your doctors, which you're supposed to do. By the way, what do they call the person who graduates last in medical school? Doctor, that's right. So even that doctor, they hear those symptoms, can't lose weight, moody, constipation, brain fog, hair issues. They say, hey, that sounds to me like a thyroid issue. So they do some blood work, right? And they do a marker, you should know this, called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. It comes from your pituitary gland. And you get a call about 2-3 days later, maybe from the office, and they say, hey, Mrs. Jones, you need to come in. Doctor got your blood work back. And so you're like, well, off the other end of the line didn't sound too good, but you're concerned. But you go in and you make an appointment, and eventually you go in and the doctor says, hey, Mrs. Jones, I want to tell you, you have something called primary hypothyroidism. Here, take this. And this is a script that begins with S, ends with D, and sounds like, that's right, Synthroid. Or it begins with L, ends with E, and sounds like, levothyroxine. By the way, it's the #1 prescribed drug in America, over 23 million a month. And so, actually, you're happy. You're like, I knew something was wrong. The doctor found it. I got to take this thing. Okay, good. Life is good. And then here's when you guys you fall into 3 different categories. Sorry. The first one's about 90% of you. Big percentage. You go back for your follow-up. You go for blood work. And the doctor says, hey, we're good. Your TSH is now normal. Air quotes on purpose. You'll learn about that later. Good to go. And then you look at the doctor like he or she is crazy. Why? Because the symptoms you had before are worse, and now you have more of them. Okay, so that's 90% of you. 9% of you, roughly, you go in and the doctor says, listen, the dosage was off. I got to raise it. I got to lower it. I got to raise it. I got to lower it. Or maybe I'm going to try a different medication. Not usually in the beginning, but maybe later on. And typically, either every time or maybe every other time that you go, that's what's happened. So they can never get the dosage right. So that's 99% of you. 1% of you are actually diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, or Graves, which is an autoimmune disease. And what happened is they said the treatment for that is either to radiate your thyroid or take out part or all of the thyroid. And so after they do that, about 3 to 6 weeks later, you're in the boat with the 99% because now you're hypothyroid. And if I was in a group live setting, which I normally am, everybody'd be shaking their head. And unfortunately, that model of treatment is really stuck in the 1960s. I mean, How many of you would be upset to know that on the low end, 90%, and on the high end, 97% of you don't even have a thyroid issue? You have a different issue, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, when people tell me, they said, well, my doc checked my thyroid, okay? So that's not specific enough. So what that typically means is you had your TSH checked, right? Maybe some of you had free T3 and free T4, but that's 3 of about 11 markers. So a full thyroid panel consists of TSH, free T3, total T3, T3 uptake, reverse T3, total T4, free T4, free thyroxine index, anti-thyroglobulin antibodies, and thyroid peroxidase antibodies. I'm not reading off of anything. I usually have a whiteboard, but I think I hit them all. That is a full thyroid panel. Now, if you wrote those down or looked them up on Dr. Google, and you say, hey, I'm going to go to my doctor and have him run those markers, 50% of your doctors are going to be like, well, no, we don't run those markers. What we do is we look at your TSH and we modify your medication, and that's what I was trained to do. And your doctor's right. That is what they were trained to do. And then the other 50% will say, okay, let's run them. And then they run them, and then the test results come back in a couple days, and they say, you know what, your T3 is high, and your reverse T3 is low, and this is high. And then you're like, great, I knew that. What do we do? Oh, you just keep taking your Synthroid and keep taking your levothyroxine or whatever you're on. And so the problem is there's no medication in the traditional, what I call the pill for an ill model. There's no model for that. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know when you're watching this webinar, this video, but right now we're in the middle of COVID-19. And having an autoimmune issue, if you have it, or an immune system problem, you're at a higher risk, like my diabetic patients, for having an issue with catching that. So eventually, people need to start valuing your health. You need to know it comes from the inside, not from the outside in, but that's not what today's about. So, the full thyroid, I mean, that's a part of it. So from the Journal of Endocrinology and Metabolism, it says that 90 to 97% of you don't have a thyroid issue. What you have is your primary mechanism or cause is an autoimmune disease called Hashimoto's. You're now all fluent in Japanese. Dr. Hashimoto discovered Hashimoto's in 1895. So it's nothing new. Like if you went to your doctor and say, hey, you heard of this Hashimoto's thing? They're all going to say yes. Well, if they don't say yes, you probably should get another doctor, but that's another story. But they've heard of it. No one's going to say no. So, but here's the problem. It's an autoimmune disease which attacks the thyroid. It's not the same thing as having a thyroid issue. So having thyroid hormone for your treatment for a problem which is an autoimmune disease is like me giving you an eye exam and then giving you a knee brace for the treatment, or an elbow brace for the treatment. You can't see my knees right now, right? So here's the thing. If we were in a group setting and I said, hey, raise your hand if you've actually been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and then, usually it's maybe 1 and 2 in about 50 people. It's very low. And then I go around and I said, hey, what's your treatment plan? And they all said, well, Synthroid, levothyroxine. So the treatment plan didn't and doesn't change, okay? So it's crazy. It frustrates me so much because all the literature is out there. Okay, so here's the deal. Autoimmune diseases are genetic, meaning if you have Hashimoto's or Graves or any other autoimmune disease, someone else in your blood family has an autoimmune disease, okay? And it doesn't have to be the same one. Like your great-great-grandma could have had multiple sclerosis, then your grandma could have had lupus, and then your mom could have had Raynaud's disease, and then you have Hashimoto. So it doesn't have to be the same one. Why is this important? Well, statistically speaking, if you think you have a thyroid problem, or you do have a thyroid problem, you don't. You have an autoimmune disease, and the majority of people have kids and grandkids. So that means you passed on the genes to your kids and your grandkids. So you need to think about, is anyone in my family that I recall, blood family, have an autoimmune disease? So let's just run down some of the ones I can think of off the top of my head. Type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, eczema, psoriasis, ulcerative colitis, fibromyalgia, Hashimoto's, Graves, multiple sclerosis, lupus, these Raynaud's syndrome, endometriosis. These are all autoimmune diseases. So if someone you can think of has had that diagnosis, then it's a probability that you have the autoimmune disease. Now, let's talk about fertility. If there's a condition called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, when as a woman you have too much testosterone. And that can have a big a negative effect on your ability to get or stay pregnant. So if anyone in your female blood family has had trouble with that, it's another sort of, it could be that. And the problem with autoimmune diseases is this. They don't fall into the box. Like there's no like traditional way of handling it, okay? Basically, first of all, you have the diagnosis, okay? And you will die with the diagnosis because it's genetic. You can't undo it. But the key is to handle the triggers. But I want to go back to something I mentioned before when I said normal. So what you have to realize is when you do blood work, the normal values on the right-hand side, it says reference intervals. It says reference intervals, right? Those are not normals. Those are averages. And they are based on geography and the lab you went to. So we happen to be in the DC area right now, right? So if you go to LabCorp uses 0.45 to 4.5 as the normal. It's not the normal, it's the average. Quest uses 0.40 to 4.5. Kaiser uses 0.32 to 5.8. If you lived in California, the numbers are different. If you lived in Minnesota, the numbers are different. If you go to a different lab, the numbers are different. Like, it doesn't even pass the common sense test because it's not a normal, it's an average, and it's huge. So we use what's called the functional level, which there's two. We're not going to get into that right now, but there's a couple. So it doesn't matter which lab you go to, and it doesn't matter where you live. We just use meaning how's your body functioning? What does the number need to be ideal to be functioning? Okay. Now, so the first pillar, the first thing that needs to be done in a person is, hey, let's figure out if you have Hashimoto's. So that's sort of the first test that's done on people who don't know, right? Then, if you do, then what needs to happen is through testing, we need to figure out, we call them the triggers. There's roughly 59 triggers. You could have fatty liver, leaky gut. You could have adrenal fatigue. You could have food sensitivities. You could have heavy metal issues. You could have biotoxins. You can have inflammation, inflammatory markers out of the wazoo. You can have as many things wrong. But if we find which of these triggers are problems with you, and then we customize a plan based on your specific triggers, well, then we can come up with the plan to customize based on your testing results. And then so we handle the triggers. You still have the Hashimoto's or whatever autoimmune disease you have, but you don't go through life feeling like crap, right? And you patients, you guys feel, the problem is this, you know something's wrong, but you go to the doctor who's supposed to know more than you, and they're not really just equipped to help you. So you have a skin issue and you go to the dermatologist, and you can't sleep and you go to this doctor and get your Ambien, and you go to endocrinologist and you get your thyroid hormone, and you go to your GI doctor to get your stomach, and then you're feeling depressed and blue and you go to get some anti-anxiety medication. So you're going to this doctor for this doctor for that, and nobody says, hey, this is a person who has multiple issues, who needs to be looked at as a whole, and we need to integrate every single organ and system that they have going on in their body. But when we can do that, we can come up with a plan. Now, here's the problem. As a patient, because we only take 8 cases per month of this, you might say, I want to get this handled, and then you say, okay, I'm going to do the testing, and then you hear what you have to do, and you're like, woo, my motivation wasn't what it needed to be. So you must have the proper level of motivation. Our program's based on 3 basic pillars. Focus, you're going to have to focus, okay? Do you have to be perfect? No, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to do your best, right? And then you have to be okay with being held accountable, because you're going to give us a list of things you want handled, and we are going to handle them. And if you're not following through, we need to get you to follow through. And I used to have a mentor years ago, and he goes, do you ever accept a case where you really know you're not sure if they can follow through or not, and you think that you're gonna motivate them to be able to do something that they don't really want to do on your own? I was like, all the time. He's like, yeah, you got to stop doing that. You cannot make somebody do something that they don't really want to do. So if you're like, this is our ideal avatar patient, right? You know something's wrong. You've done some things, maybe successfully, maybe not, I don't know. But you're like, I just can't get to the next area. But if somebody told me what to do, who knew about these issues and could put together a doable, winnable, step-by-step plan, and that if I could follow that, it would work, then you are a good fit. Okay? What are some non-negotiable things? So you'll have the ability to have a consultation and or see if you have the Hashimoto's, right? Because that's first what we have to do. If you already know, you just have the consultation. If your health is your number one priority, you're going to be a good fit. Okay? If you have the right focus and priorities, you're going to be a good fit. If you have a spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, that you eat a lot of meals with or live with, they have to come to the consultation. Why? Non-negotiable, by the way. Why? Because we have to determine and evaluate their ability to help you. Sometimes, listen, the spouse and significant other, they can either be the best supporting person or the worst. And so we have to determine that, right? Because we need to make sure we're picking the right fit so we get you good results, okay? Here's like I said before, we're in the middle of COVID-19. All the treatment can be done virtually. Okay, what we've learned through having to be in quarantine is that we don't need to see you in person. We've been doing this for years anyway, but now it's like, well, now you don't have to what? Take time off of work, get into traffic, drive through traffic, come to the office, wait in the office, and then have your, like, we are making it uber super efficient for you. Everything can be done virtually, right? We have technology where you can contest this through an app. We can do Zoom meetings, emails, texts, things like that. So it has actually become much easier to actually treat patients. And so that's taken a barrier right off the top. Okay, so if you think that you might be a good fit, then somewhere on this page is a link. Get in touch with us. And what we'll do is we'll do that. The first thing you need to do is, if you don't know if you have Hashimoto's, we will send you a requisition form to go. It's easy. It's like 1 vial of blood, not fasting. Okay. If you can't, first of all, if you can't do that, then please don't even make an appointment, because that'll be the easiest thing you have to do. Then, if you have Hashimoto's already, you know, or you test positive for Hashimoto's, then we will go through what I call a qualification process to make sure that you're a good fit and you could be successful in our office. Okay? If you don't test positive, that doesn't mean we won't be able to take your case, but it will mean we won't be able to take your case that day. Why? Because we won't know anything. So we will order testing. What kind of testing? I'm not sure. We'll figure that out on the consultation. So I hope to see some of you virtually on your next appointment, and look forward to helping some of you. For everyone else who I don't, hopefully you learned something, and good luck.